Hello and welcome to episode 274 of the Epic Film Challenge 2, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die from 2010, directed by, and I don't know how to pronounce this director's name, it's either Asif Kapadia or Asif Kapadia, or there might even be a mixture of the two, but Asif Kapadia we'll go with. He directed this documentary called Senna. And I also would like to just quickly reference that he also made another kind of biopic documentary about Amy Winehouse, I think just called Amy, in 2014-15, and that was incredible. And they're very similar in the approach that he takes to laying out this documentary. So in this case, the film Senna is about the Formula One racing driver who I believe was from Brazil. Yes, yeah, I think he was Brazilian. Yeah, he was a legend. You know, he had an incredible career in Formula One, and sadly died very young. I think he was around my age when he died, and when you see stuff like that, it kind of rattles you a little bit. And this film fucking rattled me. This documentary was, and I've had it for years, this Blu-ray, and I've always been intrigued by it. I think in 2013, Ron Howard made the film Rush, which is an incredible film about the rivalry between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, I want to say, and brilliantly played by Daniel Bruhl and Chris Hemsworth, respectively. I loved that film. I've never really been into Formula One. I'm pretty sure my grandpa used to watch it a lot, at least not my dad. So I remember it being on TV and stuff when I was a kid growing up, but I've never really been too much of a fan of it or anything. And in some ways, I think it's really reckless and kind of pointless, but I also understand the chasing of that thrill. I also understand the need for competition, the need for speed, so to speak. So I get it. But that film, the Ron Howard film, was just so fantastic and just showed you the drive and the risks and the rewards and the pitfalls and all this stuff. So I knew that I was going to enjoy this because it's a documentary. It's about real Formula One racing. And but I've been putting it off, I guess. But I finally just sat down and watched it, and holy moly! So this is about Ayrton Senna. There was a number of times in the documentary where people were calling him different things. It was Ayrton, like I don't know. We'll go with Senna, and so goes the ongoing for the rest of my life. In a anxiety-filled struggle of wanting to pronounce everyone's names like perfectly, and I just it bugs me. But Ayrton Senna we'll go with. It shows you his rise from racing go-karts into the Formula One, and his death during a Formula One race in 1994 during one of the Grand Prixes. That was something I used to think when I was a kid, that it was called a Grand Prix, but it's of course the Grand Prix. Or was it Grand Prix? I don't think you even pronounce the D in Grand, it's just a Grand Prix. And I would just see it written down as a kid and think, Grand Prix. Anyway, I almost feel like I'm avoiding talking about the film because it's so harrowing in a sense, but what's brilliant about the way Asif kind of approached the style of this documentary is that it's entirely told with archival footage. There is no talking head interview footage anywhere to be found in a single frame of this film. And a lot of the footage is rough, some of it looks like it may have been downloaded from YouTube. There's a couple of watermarks in some sections. Some of it looked really nice and you could tell was shot on film. I don't think any of it was really transferred in high definition though. So, having a Blu-ray of it is kind of, almost feels like it's neither here nor there, but I'm sure it has a healthier bit rate than the DVD version of the documentary. But, you soon forget about all that kind of standard definition footage kind of stretched to widescreen and, looking like dog shit because the story is just so compelling. We follow his rise and his joining with the French Formula One racer Alain Prost. And Prost was kind of like, from what I can understand, kind of the guy at the time. And here comes this young upstart, Ayrton Senna, and kind of joins his team. And now they're together and doing promotional stuff. And it's all kind of like, if we, kind of in the race together and, who's going to win, all that kind of stuff. And it seems very jovial. But Senna quickly rises up the ranks and it kind of devolves into this kind of bitter feud. And I read that Alain Prost was a little bit critical, maybe more than a little bit critical about this documentary and how it portrayed their relationship, because from what I understand, in the last few months of Senna's life, they kind of were a bit more friendly than they had been. But there are moments in the film where Prost says, I wanted to punch him in the face for what he did. And you see this, again, rivalry unravel throughout these races over the years in the late 80s and the early 90s. And, you see this incredible footage of them arguing, or at least Senna arguing in like these meetings with like the heads who run the organizations that kind of accommodate these events, I suppose. And there's like a kind of a French guy who's kind of portrayed as a kind of sinister Palpatine like presence, who's kind of pulling the strings and has it in for Senna. And I'm sure that might be exaggerated in some cases, or maybe it might not have even been highlighted enough. And they do talk there are kind of interviews, but they're all audio. So you just hear the voices and have the little title card of who's talking and so on. And they talk about, they don't even talk about it. Senna himself talks about. And it's this kind of really heartbreaking moment. And I think they play at the beginning and the end of the film where he says that, he was at his most happiest when he was just go-kart racing, because there was a purity to it. And I'm paraphrasing. There was a purity to just racing to race, for the competition of it, for the personal challenge of it, and for the fun of it. And that's what he loved. And when it came to Formula One, obviously he had one hell of a drive, because you need that, no pun intended, to succeed in something like that, to succeed at the highest level as he did. And he was the Grand Prix champion, however you want to call it. He won many, many big races, and I think had a fairly substantial record of some sort, and kind of won multiple titles and things. I think, from what I can gather, again, I know nothing about these things. It seems as if there are multiple Grand Prix around the world throughout the season, and then you kind of accumulatively become the champion of the whole thing. I think that's kind of how it works. So he became the overall champion a few times in a row, or at least kind of, had a really focused period where he was winning a lot. And so, he achieved mega success, amassed a huge amount of money, but, he also said that there was a politics side to the Formula One that he wasn't as interested in. And other people say in the documentary that he wasn't as good as, say, Prost was at kind of managing the politics of Formula One and kind of shaping it to his advantage, I suppose. But I really was captivated by this. And what was this really unfortunate thing was I knew that he died. So I knew that's what the film was going to be about. But I didn't know how heavily it was going to go into it. I didn't know if there was going to be controversy over his death. So, I'm kind of looking at the timer on the PS4. And so, okay, there's like we're 50 minutes in, and there's another 50 minutes to go. So he's probably not going to crash, and we're not going to see that part of his life until maybe, an hour and a half into the movie. Or are we? And for all I knew, they could have shown it an hour into the film, and then there's like a long kind of process, and maybe the big controversy about his death, because I didn't really know how he died. I knew it was a crash, but the actual nuts and bolts of exactly what happened, I had no clue. So there is a moment where he is arguing about where he's starting the race, because they did it differently from how they normally do it, and he argued against it and tried to lobby to get them to change it to the way that it usually is. So the race starts, and there's a crash right at the beginning, and I was like, oh my god, this is it, and then you're like, and then it isn't, and it's like, oh my god. And so it was this kind of edge of your seat gripping stuff, and I felt kind of bad about that, because this is someone's life that was ended, doing this. And so it became this weird kind of almost fictional narrative where it was like you're just waiting for this inevitability. Not that most fictional films, you're waiting for the main character to die. That doesn't happen, does it? But it's almost like I was expecting it, and I definitely was expecting it, but I just it had me on edge, I suppose. And it was this kind of creeping dread of knowing what was, and how much can you really know about someone when you see various interview clips of them for over like an hour and 30 minutes. I mean, not that much. You get a tiny sense of it, a tiny sliver. And he seemed like a really nice guy. He really did. He seemed like a sweet guy, a kind of a humble guy, but passionate and talented. But, for all I know, he could have been a massive prick. you know, because you just can't tell. And for all I know, he might have been like the nicest person in the history of planet Earth. I don't know. But the impression you get is that he was a very nice guy. And of course, with a documentary, they can mold it so that you see it like that, and it makes it more tragic, you know. But yeah, so I don't I can't really speak to that, but it was just really difficult to see him struggling towards the end. Now looking back at it, knowing when the crash was, they were showing footage of like the days leading up to that, where he was really stressed and really troubled. And in fact, another Formula One driver had died on the track 2 days before Senna did, you know, and so it was just fucked up what happened. And you know, these new cars came in where they were using computer controls to kind of, you know, to make the cars better. And my instant reaction was, isn't that like cheating? Like, you know, that just seems like a really, that shouldn't be allowed, but it was. And those people were now winning races, you know. So Senna had to he adapted to that and kind of, you know, got into a different car, and there were problems with it, and he crashed. And you know, they I mean, they don't show anything in graphic detail, but you see his body lying, you know, outside of the car on the track, or just to the side of the track. And to hear like the doctor, his like personal doctor, who kind of who'd become close to him and stuff, and he even says that, you know, I think it was when a crash had happened and there was like things were brought up about safety, and Senna's doctor said to him, like, look, you've won all you've done it, you know, you've won all the big ones, you know, let's just you like fishing, I like fishing, let's just go home, let's just go fish, you know. And Senna was like, I have to race, I have to do this, and he died. They didn't include this in the documentary, but I saw on Wikipedia that he had hidden a flag inside his car the day that he crashed of the man who had died 2 days previously. He had planned, if he won the race, to wave the flag of this man's home country in tribute to him, which is just like the extra kind of knife in the back of all this. It's, yeah, and it's horrible. And this thing, you know, happened almost 30 years ago now, but it feels, you know, it's within my lifetime, and I was thinking about that a lot when I was watching the film. You know, the fact that I was, you know, 5 years old when this crash happened, and that, you know, conceivably I could have been at my gramps' house when he was watching it and it all happened. And, you know, when it's within your lifetime, it feels a bit more direct, I suppose. I don't know, it just kind of hits you in a different way. And you know, that kind of the footage of, you know, that era of the 80s and 90s, that kind of very specific looking quality of videotape is something that's very nostalgic to me. And then you put that into the context of something really horrible. But also, I think it was like one of the first main races that they kind of showcase in the film. There's a camera mounted on Senna's car. And I almost felt like I was on a roller coaster. Like my stomach was almost lurching a little bit. Not that I was feeling the motion of it, but just like the holy fuck. Like that car was fucking rattling around those corners, and it's like, Jesus Christ. And it really just, you can see them like in many different camera angles, these cars just zipping around, and they're fucking custom built to just like hug the ground, and just, they're like rockets, you know. Fucking 300 miles, and it is mental. It's absolutely mental that people ever did this and continue to do this. But it's kind of over his shoulder, looking at the front of the car, and it's just, and then they bring it back a few other times, and they show you it on that lap where he died. They don't show it all the way through to it crashing and stuff, but you just see again, it's like this funeral march towards the end, and I knew that it was coming, and it, you know, and even I think it was the man who had died the 2 days previously. I think it was 2 days or 3 days before Senna's fateful crash. You see the crash, and there was two. So there was two for me, like mental crashes in the film, not including Senna's. The first one, this car fucking. I'm I'm really swearing a lot in this video, and I'm almost conscious of it because someone commented recently saying like, "Oh, you're very coarse and crass, and you know this is not becoming of whatever." Fuck it. So this car fucking launched. I think it hit a tire or something. and it just shoots up into the air, and boom. And it's just like, you think that guy's gone, but he was all right. He was rattled and a bit hurt, but he was all right. I know there was another one where you just see, like, they didn't show the crash, but there's just this guy curled up in the fetal position on the middle of the track, and the car's just everywhere. It's just completely exploded, and all that's left is he's just there, just curled up, unmoving. And again, apparently he was all right, and I thought, I didn't know if I was looking at a dead body there, you know. But the other one who did die, we see this crash, and the car swings around, and his head is just kind of like just lifeless inside the kind of what do you call it? It's not a cockpit, is it? But inside the, you know, the seats of the car, and that killed him, you know. So there's just something really unnerving about seeing a dead body for me. You know, I know a lot of people grow accustomed to it if they have that kind of work, perhaps if they work in, you know, hospitals or ambulance drivers or in war. I don't know, but, you know, I don't think I've ever seen a dead body. I probably have at some point somewhere. I don't know. I don't think I have. But, you know, it's just seeing it is very, and especially, I don't know what it is about this kind of 80s and 90s video footage that makes things feel almost more real than they really are. You know, I don't know. There's just something a bit more haunting to it, I suppose. If this had happened in today's day and age, and you see everything in high definition 4K 60 frames per second, I mean, that there's almost an unreality to that, I suppose, or you know, feeling of the surreal. And this is a complete aside, but in the WWE, they recently experimented with 8K cameras during the entrances of some of the wrestlers, and it just looked like a video game. It didn't look like real life. You know, and I'm not saying that high definition doesn't portray real life, but there's something, again, about that kind of standard definition, slightly grainy videotape footage that feels a bit more scary and kind of haunting at times, but, you know, can also capture, you know, really good stuff too. So it's one of those things that really struck me about this film, was seeing that kind of footage. It really impacted me. And yeah, so, you know, you see the crash, and kind of the outpouring, and how huge his death was, and how much of a blow that was to his home country, to his fans. And, you know, it's just it's a really sad thing that happened. I don't know how true this is, because I read it on Wikipedia, but from what I did read was that after he died, it was kind of revealed or found out that he had donated somewhere in the ballpark figure of $400 million to charities and stuff. And I don't want to say I hope that's true or anything, because I more mean I hope it's true in the case of that Wikipedia article, but I almost wish they'd mentioned it in the film, but I also appreciate that they didn't, because clearly that wasn't something that he was particularly interested in publicizing all that much, and here I am talking about it. But, you know, that's the kind of thing that is doing it for the right reasons completely, and that's something I hugely respect. And they set up a foundation, you know, in his name after that and stuff. So, you know, positive things came out of his wealth, which is a good thing. And also another big positive was the what would you call it? The increased cracking down of safety protocol with Formula One. And I think there was a title card at the end of the film that said there hasn't been a fatality in Formula One since. I looked that up, and that's not entirely accurate, but it certainly seems like it really cut things off quite considerably, which is, again, a good thing, but through an unfortunate circumstance. But what really unnerved me even more about the whole thing was that they talked about how there was a certain part of the car that apparently kind of went up into his head, and if it had been 6 inches up, 6 inches below, he probably would have been fine. And in the documentary, they say that he didn't have a single bone, not a single bone was broken. There wasn't a bruise on his body, and it was just one of those things where his head got hit and it just killed him. And that was really fucking scary, you know. And I thought, how just by the whiplash of it, you know. But then I looked it up online, and no, that, you know, there was bones in his head that were broken, like there was something that caved in, like his forehead. You know, so I think obviously there were bones broken, but I think that what they meant, whoever said that in the documentary, meant that apart from his head, there was not a bruise on his body, and that is still a very chilling thing. But you know, that kind of head trauma, and you know, the doctor, bless him, said that, you know, he was looking at him, you know, the crash site moments after it happened, they pulled his body out, and he's, he was looking, he was still technically alive, and the doctor said he looked in his eyes and just said, I knew then that he was going to die. There was just no, he could tell by the way his eyes were that he was gone, basically. It's horrible, but I mean, the documentary really captures a lot of the highs of his career. Obviously the low, the biggest low that you go, the lowest low you could imagine is to kind of go out dying, well, I suppose, is dying doing what you loved the lowest of the low? Maybe not, Clearly there was that part of him that, I need to race. But I'm sure everyone's different. I'm sure that there are people who do dangerous things for passions like rock climbing or parachuting or Formula One driving, boxing, and they may feel like, look, it's something I love doing, and that's my calling in life. And if I die doing it, then so be it. That's the life I've chosen. But I'm sure there are people who feel all that passion and all those same motivations and drives, but they would never want to die for it. And I don't really know how Senna would land on that. They don't really talk about that, and obviously it's probably not something that he would be interviewed about all that much. But it's still it's a bad way to go. It's a horrible tragedy, and way too young for anyone to go out, I think. And again, being like almost exactly that same age is like, man, I don't know. So this film really fucking rattled me, but I really appreciated the way that it was made. And there is an extended version on the Blu-ray, and I thought I'll go with the original theatrical version just to see it the way that it was released in cinemas, and likely the way that it was, put in the book 1,001 movies you must see before you die. But then I kind of put on the extended cut afterwards just to see, and it's almost 3 hours long. It's like a full hour extended. I thought, holy shit! So I was skimming through it. And all it does is it collects like the 50 odd minutes of deleted scenes on the disc and just kind of inserts them throughout the film. And it's just talking head interviews. And I watched some of it and it just completely ruins the flow of the whole thing. Like there's a real snappy pace and flow. The editing in this is absolutely phenomenal. I will actually try to give a name check to the editor, or if there was multiple editors. Yes. So Gregor Sal, and Chris King. Shout out to them because the editing is absolutely phenomenal in this, and obviously the director Asif Kapadia, who kind of shepherded the whole thing around and kind of obviously had the vision for this and the way to present it. I think was a really interesting way to go. It worked really well with the Amy documentary as well, which has a similarly fucking harrowing ending where she died way too young. But I don't know. Is it a film you should see before you die? I don't know about that. I really don't. It's a really well done documentary. It's really sad. I don't know if I'd want to watch it too many more times, really, to be honest. I think I'd keep it in my collections. I think it's a great documentary, but I don't know if it's a film you should see before you die. I'm going to go with yes. I'm going to say yes. It's a soft yes. But I think that, it's a fascinating thing to look at someone who died doing something they're passionate about and had achieved success at the highest global level possible. Someone who became a superstar, megastar, who was at his happiest when it was just about the racing, who died doing it. And it's a kind of, I hate to use the word great, but it's a great kind of tragedy. It really is it's almost operatic, someone who dedicated their life to something. And it was the end of them, and it's obviously very tragic and everything, but it does make for a compelling story. And I'd be intrigued to see how I would enjoy or, appreciate the documentary now knowing when he died, so I wouldn't be like on edge about, when's it going to happen. I can just kind of maybe focus more on, what's actually going on. But it's, there's a great little moments in these little interviews and things, and there's little talk show segments and lots of stuff pulled together. It's a great collection of archival footage, and it's often the stuff that, it's just there obviously was a treasure trove of kind of material there, because there'll just be parts where like a camera's just filming him, when he's just lost in thought somewhere, like in a pit stop or in the garage with all the F1 cars or whatever it's called. Like, there's just these great little micro moments where, there's a lot going on behind those eyes, and you're kind of wondering what it is, and the story's being told to you. And I think that it's a wonderful marriage of kind of visual storytelling and using the interview stuff to kind of drive along the points of the story. And they very clearly condensed a lot. I'm sure there's so many other twists and turns and elements of the Senna Prost rivalry and things like that, and maybe other rivalries. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot you can cover in someone's life when they do something like that for quite a long time. Many years he was kind of at the top of his game and stuff, and they cover the different branding changes and the different kind of cars and the kind of what would you even call it, the kind of the companies that he would sign with, I suppose, and be represented by. But some of that stuff in like the meetings before the races, like, is just really interesting stuff. And it was very intriguing how he was really at home in the rain, which is usually when they call races off if it gets too bad. But he was really like a demon on the track when it was raining. Like, he just worked really well under like extreme circumstances, But anyway, so I found him to be charming. The story very sad, and the documentary very well done. And I will say that it probably is a film you should see before you die. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.